Hello, a very good evening and welcome along to this very special edition of the NUFC 360 podcast. Apologies for the slight technical delay. We're up and running now. It is Thursday, the 6th of October. Ladies and gentlemen, get your cans out, take down your Sports Direct signs, and up the Premier League we go. It's our Takeover Anniversary. I'm your host, Stuart Montgomery, and tonight we're joined by two of our usual cohorts, Max and Matt, as well as a very special esteemed guest for the night. It's Sky Sports' very own Keith Downie. Keith, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your time this evening. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm pretty tired, if I'm honest with you. It's been a bit of a busy week. Been out and about filming today with Eddie Howe and his backroom staff, obviously on the eve of what is obviously a bit of a celebration for Newcastle tomorrow, the 1 year anniversary of the takeover. But obviously there's so much else going on in the background with another big game at the weekend and whatnot. So yeah, I'm pretty tired, but I have to say, I'm not as tired as I was 364 days ago.
We will get to that. I believe we will. But again, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I don't think I slept the night before that, because obviously we're aware it was going to happen. And it was a pretty crazy couple of days, but you know, it was very enjoyable. So I'm sure we'll get into that.
Oh yeah, it's been so valuable to have that sort of insight. You know, we can only dream of that sort of thing. Max, Matt, how are you, gents?
Yeah, good.
All good, thank you. All good.
Good stuff. No pressure, gents, but you have to keep up with those really, good nuggets and stories that Keith's going to have. So just no pressure at all there. We'll start off with you, Keith, just because obviously, you're our special guest for the evenings. I want to start off just with that. We retweeted or tweeted it out today. It's you breaking the announcement all the way back, as you say, 365 days ago, live on Sky Sports. And like many Newcastle United fans, I've watched and rewatched that, a little snippet of clip, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of times. And there's one line from you that's always stuck in my head ever since I've heard it. And rewatching it again today, it stuck it again. And I'm going to quote you, if you don't mind. And it's when you're basically ramping up to reading the official statement out. And you didn't just read it out. What you said was, I'll read it to you. And you said, I'll read every word of it, which always struck me as a slightly odd thing to say. Odd in the sense that, to me, it came across as you having some sort of personal input into this. Something a little bit more profound than just announcing a deadline day loan or a manager sacking. Did you have any idea how seismic those words would be that you were about to utter for Newcastle United fans all around the world?
Well, I did, yeah, absolutely. And I think, there was a big build-up all day to that, and it's strange actually, because not many people know this, but I'd actually had the statement there on my phone for a little bit of a time before that, so I'd actually read it over in my head a number of times, and I'd obviously kept looking at it. I was loath to tell my cameraman who stood next to me, the presenter, and I was told, look, only a handful of people have got this statement, so I knew it was done, but obviously we couldn't announce it until the funds were transferred and I was given the thumbs up. And the person who was giving me the thumbs up was obviously someone very high up in the talks. And I just got a WhatsApp message, having had the statement sent to me maybe an hour earlier, something like that. I must have read it over about 20 times. I just kept glancing at my phone and reading it and almost trying to get it into my head. And I got the text, and it was literally, I've still got it on my WhatsApp on my phone, and it was just like thumbs up, and it just said go. And I was so unsure. I was so unsure of myself and so scared after all the issues we'd had in the past that then made, I don't know if you remember, but when the presenter threw to me, he's like, Keith's just making a phone call. That was because I still needed certainty. I needed to hear the voice then to say, yeah, you can go with it. So I then phoned and said, look, is this definitely the case? I'm like, yeah, go for it. So I think we needed to double and triple check everything. And that's because obviously we'd all been so close before to it going through. We'd all been let down when it hadn't happened. The likes of myself and some of the other journalists in the Northeast were probably collateral damage in it all, because when we got it wrong, and I think maybe we were a little bit naive at times when we got it wrong, we got blamed for that. And I suppose kind of rightly so, because people got their hopes up. But I think we were upset that that kind of we were not blamed for it, but we were part of the failure, if you like, of it not going through. So I'd read it over so many times, and then because I'd kind of been reading it, I just thought to myself, do you know what? There's no need to just rush this and say the takeover is over, it's past, and then hand back. I thought, you know, you kind of, those who are watching on TV and the fans watching at home kind of deserve to hear every kind of word of the statement. And normally I would just I'd normally just pick out a couple of lines, but I just felt it was such a seismic moment that it was important to read out every line of it. And I almost wanted to read it out twice, because I don't think I got it. I got so kind of like caught up in it all, and there was so much adrenaline in my body that I probably didn't read it as clearly and as concisely as I probably wanted to. And I got to the end, I thought, you know what, I want to do this again. And, you know, the reason obviously I got a little upset later is because I just felt the adrenaline just left my body. And obviously I realized what I was saying meant so much to all you guys and so many other supporters across the world, really. And I knew, listen, I'd built it up for about 24 hours beforehand. And listen, even before that, when we came so close to it being pushed through previously, I built up this kind of vision in my head. And that vision in my head, I have to say, was exactly what happened that night. So I kind of knew what was to come. I could see the fans were already congregating. I knew it was a big, big moment. And I knew that I wanted to deliver it well. So I just thought, do you know what? Rather than trying to be smart about this, I'm just going to read out exactly what it says and let the words kind of do the talking. So that was how it panned out. But yeah, I had it on my phone beforehand, and I'd read it out, and I had this, like, obviously everyone kind of at that point knew it was going to happen, but it was the fact that I had the statement there, and I was like, I didn't tell anyone. I was just like reading it. I was like, God, I can't believe I've got this. It was like having a ticket for the Willy Wonka chocolate factory that no one else had, and I had it there, and I couldn't tell anyone that I had it. It was a really, really strange experience. So when I did get to announce it and break it, it was just it was kind of the hairs in the back of the neck type situation, and it just I just knew how much it meant to so many other people, and I knew it was going to change everything for everyone, which is why obviously I probably got caught up in the emotion of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was my next question. You've answered it extremely astutely there. You know, was there an element of personal closure to it for you because you've been through so many of those sagas and involved? And as I say, you've essentially confirmed that. You said it there about how much it meant and about how impactful it can be. And I was just reading only the replies today of us retweeting something that was a year ago, and a lot of the people, the fans, were saying this still gives me goosebumps. And yes, it's the news, but it's also how that news was delivered, which obviously is a credit to yourself. But you know, we wanted. It's all very well, you know, Joe Blogs on Twitter saying something and hearing it through social media, but it's different when you have someone like yourself standing in front of it and making that, you know, as you said, I'll only believe it when I see them holding the shirt or whenever I see the yellow bar going across, things like that. So that obviously meant a lot. I'll jump around the room a wee bit here. I want to sort of imagine a little bit. We're all very happy. I want to bring us right back down to earth just for a second and say, I have to imagine a different timeline that this takeover had not happened, which obviously is a distinct possibility, or seemed a distinct possibility 369 days ago or whatever it was. If this takeover hadn't happened, and Max, I'll start with you. Where do you think Newcastle United would be right now? You know, position, league, you know, manager, things like that. Where do you think we would be?
Mid-table championship team. Maybe top championship.
Right. So okay.
Yeah, it also depends on what would have happened with Steve Bruce. How long would he have stayed on? If we got in a new manager, who would that be? There's a lot of factors we don't know, but the trend that was during that time was only going downwards, and it was now going downwards really fast. So I can only see it being something like that.
Interestingly, Tom Proudfoot in the comments says we'd be West Brom, which is not dissimilar to what you're saying at the moment with the obvious allusions to Steve Bruce. I'm inclined to agree. Matt, what about you? Do you think any different to Max? Do you think we would have? I mean, because to give, you know, I suppose not even necessarily credit, but just to look at the sort of the proof is in the pudding. You know, we had stayed up the previous two seasons. Do you think we would have rallied and stayed, or do you think we would end up where Max would be?
Yeah, no, I feel like as though we would have got relegated. It depends, obviously, if we'd have kept Steve Bruce or not. But the 2 seasons prior to that, we were quite lucky to actually stay up. We always left it literally to the last few games of the season. It seemed like we were comfortable because we'd pick up like 9 points in the last 4 or 5 games, and all of a sudden we're mid-table when it wasn't really the reality. The reality was we were hovering over that danger zone for quite a few seasons. So, yeah, I do feel as though we'll be a mid-table championship team similar to West Brom.
You Keith, you've seen obviously a lot of the Newcastle games in your position. Is that? Would you agree with the lads there, or do you think we would have rallied? In your opinion?
Yeah, I have to say, I thought it felt very much like Newcastle were going to go down last season. You kind of have a few lives at these things, and I felt, as Matt alluded to there, I felt you'd had a couple of lives beforehand by just escaping, and I just felt, it felt like the players that were there had almost they'd fought so hard for the last few years. I wasn't sure if they still had enough fight in them to stay up under Steve Bruce. I think it needed a change. And listen, you've got to remember, even if the takeover had happened and they changed the manager, you still needed that January transfer. I think a combination of the manager change and the January transfer window kept you up. I mean, I think it would have been a real task for Eddie Howe to keep that team up without the additions that they made in January. But I think the combination of the two did that. And I have to say, just looking back, I mean, it was amazing. I was reading a piece earlier from one of my colleagues, and I actually forgot that when the takeover went through, Newcastle were bottom. I think in my head, I always thought they were like 3rd or 4th bottom, but you were actually bottom at the league at the time. And I don't think you come back from that. I don't think you'd won either. I don't think you'd won a match. I don't think it would have happened. But I think the takeover, once everyone got over the kind of initial shock of it all, those first few weeks, and that turning point at Leeds United, I think the takeover and everything that went with that, I think that led you to get over the line. I mean, listen, it would have been an absolute nightmare if Newcastle had been relegated last season following the takeover. Everyone would have been laughing at the club. It would have, of course, you would have come straight back up without a doubt, but it just would have set everything back a little bit. And I just think that first 6 months after Eddie arrived, taking the team to the end of the season, it's going to be one of the key parts moving forward once you get to where you want to be. I think everyone will look back at that. They'll look back at the takeover day and those first sort of few months after. I mean, I remember, never mind the takeover day, the match against Spurs the following week on Sunday afterwards, the kind of mood around the city in the build up to that game, just round about the stadium was just, I mean, it was unbelievable on takeover night, but I actually, in many ways, actually enjoyed more being, I remember being inside the stadium. We were doing lots of build up pitch side, and I just said to my colleague Pete, who I was with, I said, I'm going outside for a wander around because I just want to go and sort of soak this up a little bit and see what's going on, because you could tell there was a real crackling atmosphere outside the stadium, and that was what 10 days afterwards. So listen, to answer your question, yes, I think Newcastle were going down. I think the manager change and the takeover, and of course the money that was spent in January, you can't forget that. I think that is what obviously saved Newcastle, and thankfully it happened when it did. Thankfully it wasn't further into the season.
Yeah, I mean, they're all really good points. The Matt, you were at the Spurs game, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I got into town early and just to soak up the atmosphere, and I hadn't been up for a few months, and when I got there, the atmosphere just felt like it changed like that. When Callum Wilson first scored, I think it was a few minutes in, it just went absolutely mental. The crowd, I've never seen anything like that at St James's for a long time, and it just felt like it was a new lease of life. It felt like we'd actually turned a corner, and now we can actually think positively instead of negatively.
It was very cathartic goal. I think someone described it as being the ball was sucked into the net by the fans, like literally, like just that level of support. It was absolutely incredible. Okay, well, flipping that in his head a little bit, then where do you see Newcastle United 1 year hence from now? Then obviously takeovers happened. Where do you think we'll be, Max? What do you think?
Hard to say. Depending on how this season goes, I hope we could get Europe maybe, but I don't think this is the season we do. I think from the results and the games we've seen so far, we're not quite there yet. The philosophy of Eddie Howe hasn't really sunken in. He doesn't really have the material yet to do exactly what he wants the team to do. To be honest, I'm happy that so far this season I haven't seen us below the line. What do you say? relegation positions. Just to see us in around top 10 for this few games now is so nice, and not even to think about relegation. It's the first time in my life as a supporter to not even think about it, and just to don't have that feeling so good, and just to look upwards and onwards rather than downwards, and have anxiety for every game. Now I'm excited for every game. I want to see us play every day, and for the past 5 years it hasn't been like that.
Yeah, I think someone said before, like the match day experience, the worst part of it was going to the match in the past. Like going to the pint, having a pint with the lads was good, and seeing your friends and everything, and it's ruined by a game of football in the middle. Matt, what about you? Where do you see us in a year from now?
Yeah, to be honest, I'd be happy with slow progression. I'd be happy with 10th, and then I'm happy with 9th. I'm happy with 8th. Because we get too ahead of ourselves, what we probably did at the end of last season, where we probably overachieved with the squad we have. It's sort of left recent games where we're probably questioning, why are we drawing so many games? Well, it might be just where we are at now at the minute. Yeah. And it'd be nice to just gradually work our way up the table and look upwards and not backwards, because, over previous years, we spent a lot of time going into games worried that we're just going to get hammered and we'll just be sitting behind the ball.
Yeah,
it's not the case now.
Yeah, the possession stats alone, just looking at those, we talked about in the podcast last week, just the possession stats, how Newcastle's have improved immeasurably. I mean, I think it was 2 seasons ago, the average was about 40%, maybe 38% possession a game, and that was across the season. And now we're hitting, I think the average is closer to 68, 69 or 70. That's transformative. It's huge. It's literally a different style of play. Keith, what about you? Where do you think Newcastle will be in a year?
Well, I mean, I was asked at the start of the season where I thought Newcastle would finish this season. I actually predicted 7th. Now, I don't know whether that was kind of getting a little bit too far ahead of myself. I noticed a couple of comments there already coming across the bottom of the screen saying that Newcastle...
Yeah. Well, some are agreeing with you. They're saying 7th and 6th. Yeah.
Yeah. I have to say, though, that was based on looking at the other teams. And, and out with the top 6, and obviously Man United, as we all know, have been struggling quite badly. I don't see too many squads. I mean, I think Wolves have actually got a strong squad, but they've not been getting the results. They just obviously sacked their manager. And West Ham have a strong squad. West Ham, I think, could be distracted by the fact that they're playing on a Thursday night. I just think Newcastle have got that in their favour because they can kind of concentrate just on the Premier League matches. I think that will help them. Now, I'm trying not to put too much pressure on them by saying they should finish 7th, or they could finish 7th. But I honestly do feel they've got the togetherness in the players, if they avoid too many serious injuries, to do that this season. So, of course, finishing 7th, of course, would mean, well, we know what it'd mean in terms of European football next season. I just feel, and it was interesting, both Max and Matt saying it there, I just think for you guys as supporters, you don't want to get too far ahead and then find you're sort of taking 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. I just think you need to, and I'm sure you all will, but I just think you need to enjoy the journey. I mean, look what happened with Manchester City and in Chelsea. They were able to chuck money at it straight away, and they went from 0 to 100 really, really fast. Okay. Whereas the support will be just like, wow, this has just happened, and they probably couldn't take it in. Where I actually think because of the financial fair play restrictions that the club have got, I actually think it will make the journey a little bit more enjoyable, because you'll be able to see the step-by-step progression rather than just jumping from, relegation fodder to suddenly up there in the top 3 or 4 in the division. So I think it'll make it more enjoyable. And listen, you don't need to. You've had 14 years of hell as far as you guys are concerned. So let's just eke it out. Let's drag it out, and let's not be like, trying to run before we can walk. So next season, where would you be this time next year, October? Well, listen, we're obviously at the start of the season. I think next season you've got to be looking to qualify for Europe if you don't do it this season. I've just got a little sneaky feeling. at the end of the season you're going to be there or thereabouts for Europe. I really do.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think Eddie's come out and said this is I've alluded to it being a bit of a transition season. As we'll get to later on, there was a very good article in The Athletic today about from George Culkin about what the plans were and about a number of transfer windows they believe it'll take. But I think you're right. I think there's definite seeds there that are to be growing this year. All right. So
Stuart, I'm just going to say, sorry to interrupt you there. If you look at the players that have been brought in so far, you've got 8 players there, okay, in 2 transfer windows. I honestly think there could well be a situation this time next year where you could have a full starting 11 of players that have been signed since the takeover. If you're going at the rate that we are at the moment, if you bring another, say, three players in January, maybe 2-3 players in January, and then maybe another 3 or 4 next summer, you're looking at a full starting 11. Now, I'm not saying that means that Alan St. Maximin's going to be gone or Joe Linton's going to be in the bench. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying you could then have the option of a full squad that would replace the existing 11. Who would have thought that within it'll be under 2 years? So although we're saying this is a slow progress, guys, let's look at the facts here. You spent nearly £250 million in 2 transfer windows. You've got a new chief executive, you've got a new sporting director, you've got a new manager who has been phenomenal alongside his full backroom team. You've got 8 new signings. You've smashed your transfer record by £20 million. So we're sitting here and going, let's do it gradually. And it can look when you actually think about it, because you're thinking about it on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis. But when you actually lay it all bare in front of you, there has been a whole lot of change in this last year.
It's been completely. It's been, as I say, I use that phrase quite often. I say it's supporting a different team. It's a completely different team. I don't mean like fit the team on the pitch. I mean altogether, it's like a different club altogether. I'm sure you feel that, from the outside in and reporting on a daily basis or very, very often. But a good point was made, or I've heard being made quite a lot, about those players that have come in, like Guimaraes and maybe ASM, places like that. People that have come and joined the project that are young. Let's use Isak as an example, and Guimaraes and people like that. They've been sold a project, but they are, if you use Guimaraes, I call him world class, but maybe it's not quite that high, but he's extremely good. He is not going to wait around for 4 or 5 seasons while we're maybe 7th, 6th thing. He's going to want to push on. So they're going to need to be that sort of quick at it. So as you say, it's a balancing act. It's trying to get that the right thing. And as you've alluded to, I think we're doing that. I want to ask a wee question, Jen, just going back to this time last year. And I'll start with you, Keith. And yours is obviously a unique perspective on this. At what point did you believe that, I think it's going to happen? You obviously knew when you were officially told, I've been told by someone. But at what point did you think, I think this actually might happen? Was it when someone, told you something, or was it more just you got a feeling, or what was it?
So I was actually doing a sort of investigation in the latter part of the summer last year into why the takeover had stalled, and I was tasked by my boss to try and look into why we were kind of at a standoff. And I was writing away to the Premier League. I'd written away to every chief executive at every Premier League football club to try and get an insight as to what had gone on in the Premier League meetings. I was trying to speak to Mike Ashley. I was trying to speak to the buyers, the consortium. I was trying to get into everyone to try and get a bit more information, because everything was really on the QT and there was no information getting out there. So I was actually tasked with this, and I was obviously rattling a few cages, trying to speak to people, when I got a call from someone who is sort of well connected to those who were making the decision to say, look, I know what you're doing and that's fair enough, but just hold fire just now. And I think the words were something along the lines of, things could change in this quite soon. Now, I wasn't told the takeover's happening. I wasn't told the takeover's off. I was trying to read into it. That's all I was told. So in my mind, I'm thinking, right, the takeover's either happening or the takeover's not happening. Now, me being the pessimist after what had gone on for the last 2 years, I probably was telling myself it's going to fall through. And I mean, obviously they'd walked away the previous summer, but we all knew they were still kind of there. Mike Ashley had made sure that the consortium was still there in the background and they were available to go should they get the green light. So at that stage, I was like, oh God, what does this mean? But I did think, right, at least we're going to get a definitive here. Something tangible is going to come. It's either going to be fully off or it's going to be on. So I kind of stepped back from the investigation that I was struggling with. Like, I wasn't getting very far, but at least I was trying. And I stepped back from it, and it was 3 weeks, just under 4 weeks later, I think, that the takeover went through. So I kind of had that in the background, but listen, I was so scared by it at this point to even say anything to anyone. I think I told one or two of my mates and said, listen, I've been doing this investigation, but I've been told by so-and-so to hold off. And they were like, oh, this sounds good. And they kept asking me about it all the time. But because we'd had so many close shaves before, I was still very unsure about it, I have to say. So that was that side of it. And then the day before the takeover went through on the 6th, so a year ago today, I was actually playing golf over in South Shields. And I got a call to say the consortium, or members of the consortium, are on their way to Newcastle. And at that moment, I was like, on their way. But even then, I still didn't believe it until I actually was playing golf and I had to leave early. I think I got to about the 12th hole. And I said to my mate who I was playing with, who's a big Newcastle fan as well, actually, I quite often go to the matches with him. And I said, listen, I'm going to have to go here. I can't concentrate on the golf because I was like, something's brewing here. So I left, drove back through to Newcastle from South Shields, was told to go straight to the Jesmond Dean House Hotel, got there, and members of the consortium were there, including Amanda Stavely. And I was like, wow. And at this point, I thought, they don't travel there to Newcastle. They hadn't been there before, apart from just to attend the odd game. They don't travel there and ask me to come. I know that they asked a couple other journalists to come as well to make them aware that where they were. And we were making a plan for the next day, how they were going to do it, how they were going to announce it, and what interviews we were going to have, and all this. And I was like, wow, this is actually happening. So when I got home that night, it was quite late in the evening, I just knew, I thought to myself, right, this is it, it's happening. And I think the message was at that time when I went to bed on the Wednesday night, the message was they were going to announce it at 10 o'clock in the morning. So, of course, I didn't get much sleep. As I've kind of touched on already, I was mulling over in my head how I was going to say it and what I was going to do, and probably built myself up into a little bit of a frenzy. Didn't get much sleep, woke up at 7 o'clock, got myself to the stadium, did a couple of lives. Even then, I was still trying to talk it down because I was so aware of building people up again and then it falling through. So I was actually probably even more negative about it than I had been in the past, because even though they were there and I knew they were just like a couple of miles up the road in the hotel, I just was like, we cannot get this wrong again. We cannot have this situation again. So I was kept saying to people, not going to, although it's quite far advanced, we're not going to believe it until we get the statement. And that's just what I did all day long. But it was quite good the way it worked out, because had it broken in the morning at 10 o'clock, I think it would have been a bit of a sort of, obviously the fans would have congregated later on, but it would have been a bit of a slow day. Whereas the way it built up to the kind of crescendo at 5 o'clock, it actually worked out perfectly, and the people were finishing work and kids were out of school and everyone was making their way to the stadium. And I just thought it worked really well. Obviously for us as well at Sky Sports News, it was International Week, so there was so little news elsewhere. We just went massive on it every hour, every day for the next fortnight. I actually counted, I think I did 89 live hits in 10 days. So an average of 9 live hits, and some of them were like 10, 15 minutes a time. Like I was just, by the end of it, I was just like a zombie. So to answer your question, I got that information 3-4 weeks before. I read into it a little bit, but didn't think that meant the takeover was definitely happening. I was actually quite pleased I was able to stop doing that investigation, because it was absolutely destroying my soul. But I think I finally believed it when I drove through from South Shields to Newcastle that late afternoon, drove to the hotel still in my golf gear, and the consortium were there, and they came out to say hi and introduce themselves and give us a plan as to what the next day. And at that moment I was like, wow. And obviously I was trying to text a few of my mates to say you're never going to, and it was just, it almost just felt surreal. It's surreal that we were at that stage. But that was because I was obviously really, really kind of sort of negative about the whole situation given what had happened in the past. That was why, even as I was reading that statement out, even as I was reading it to myself, until I was told to go with it, I still wasn't 100% certain, just because we'd been there before and been so close, and obviously we didn't want that to happen again.
Look, yeah, I mean, surreal's the exact word I would describe it as, and a lot of us, I don't know about Max and Matt, I know for myself, I was so skeptical about everything that had come through because of being burnt so many times. Matt, at what point did you think, all right, this is going to happen. This is actually going to happen. I'm leaning. I've moved past sort of neutral now. I'm now in more positive. I think this might actually happen.
At first, after over the years we've had the other takeover attempts, you build your hopes up and then it doesn't go through, and it keeps happening. So it's just rinse and repeat. So I just felt like I was going to be with Mark Ashley for the rest of my life. You know, it got to the point where I didn't give up, but when it was it come about during lockdown and through COVID, I had a lot of spare time. So I'd go, you know, on Twitter, and I'd become obsessed with it. I'd go through information. I'd be like, right, what's happening today? What's happening now? And then over the months, it gradually, like, it was like a horrible, horrible roller coaster. And it got to the point where I thought, is it happening or is it not? And then when we found out that they pulled out, at that point, I did give up. I thought, right, that's it now. And then obviously rolling on a few more months, word was coming around that it possibly could be happening again. And when I saw Luke Edwards tweet, when I saw him tweet saying, no matter all skeptical tweets,
that's me too.
When I saw him say it could possibly be happening, I thought, right, that's it then. Newcastle shirt was on. I was sitting in front of the television. Sky Sports News was on. So no, but that was on the Wednesday. So Matt, I think.
So Matt, at that stage, obviously, we were aware of the same information. I think Luke was one of the other ones who were invited there. So, like, I'd obviously met them. He'd met them as well. But I was still too scared to say that, even though they were there. I was still too scared. I was still like, I don't know if. I think Luke's probably got a bit more guts than me, and he just went.
I'm not sure about guts. I think Luke doesn't really care if people don't like him or not. He is a very fractious relationship with Newcastle fans at the best of times, and if it went wrong, I think he'd be perfectly happy to tell us just to sling one. To be honest with you, I don't think you're doing yourself a disservice there.
Do you know the other funny information, guys? Other funny situation with this was. And I forget about this quite a lot, but I don't know if you remember the day before the takeover in the morning, on the Wednesday morning, there was some information that came out. I think it was either in the Times or the Telegraph. I don't know. Maybe this is where Luke was getting the information from at the time, but I can't remember who wrote it. It wasn't a Northeast-based journalist, but there was all this information about the TV rights deal, them sorting out the issues of the TV rights deal, and the fact that they meant that the takeover could happen. And it was a really detailed piece, and I'm like, where are they getting this from? And obviously I'd heard that the consortium were on their way, but I was like, where are they getting all this in? And I kind of wanted all this background, and all that day I was like, why have I not, like, I need this info? And a couple of people started reporting it, and then on the Thursday morning I got myself to the stadium and I did a couple of live hits first thing, and then I looked at my phone, and then for some reason, I don't know why, but I went into my junk folder, which I never ever do, and I had an email from someone high up involved in beIN Sports, I think it was. And he said, look, I want to keep my name out of this, but this is a situation with a TV deal, and it means that the takeover can happen. It could happen very quickly. And it was an email with a red exclamation mark. And it was, you know, when you're reading, this is legit here. This has got, and I looked at it and I went, oh, that's all the information that was in the broadsheet, the Times or the Telegraph. And I was like, God, I could have had all this shit. And the one time you've got an email with that level of information, and it went to my junk folder, and I was like, God, and I saw it the next morning. I'm like, God, this would have saved me the last 24 hours of scurrying around trying to find out why it was going through when all the information was sitting there in my junk mailbox. Was ridiculous. Honestly, it's a really ridiculous situation.
I know. Those like crossroads moments there, you know. It's I was the same as you, Matt, to be honest with you. I think I saw Edward's tweet. I was going into on my job, I was going into school to do training, and I got the tweet, and most of the comments in the tweet were along the lines of, has Luke been hacked? Because he's being positive about Newcastle and things like that. And he actually responded to the comment saying, no, I haven't been hacked. I'm more positive about this than ever been, blah, blah, blah. I'm not confirming it, but could I concentrate during any of that training session? Like, not a lick. Like, it just, all I was thinking about was takeover. I just want to go back in the car. By the time I got back in the car a couple of hours later, it was all but confirmed. And a big long drive back home. And on the drive home, it wasn't announced, because it wasn't announced until Keith came on and said it. But it was to the point where it said, yeah, it's going to happen. We all knew it was done. It was done then. Max, obviously you're in Sweden, and is it different for you? Is it the same? When did you think this is on?
No, it was exactly the same as you guys. I had the experience of the roller coaster. You know, I was pretty much done with everything to do with Newcastle after that Wolves game, as pretty much everyone else was. It was not really even rock bottom. It was down to the earth's core. I don't know what to. I didn't have any feelings towards anything. It was just numb. I was numb. It was the worst feeling ever. So when the on the Wednesday when things started to rumble, it's maybe happening. Maybe I was like, no, I'm not gonna get my hopes up because I have done this so many times before, and I'm not gonna do it. And I remember on the Thursday morning, I think there were some more tweets coming out. This is maybe happening, and I was starting my work, and I was through the whole day, checking Twitter every hour, just watching the news as best I could. And I remember so clearly that when I got home, I took a nap, and I woke up, and it was just before our dinner, and I saw Keith's tweet about breaking news. It's I can't confirm takeover, and I shouted and I jumped in my pants like, what's happening? I was like, the takeover, and then they didn't understand. I was like, doesn't know, you don't know what's happening. And it was also the moment when you're so happy and like shocked. I for a moment before I screamed out, I stood still for like 2 minutes just reading the tweet. Is this actually true? Is this happening? It was the same when Isak signed for Newcastle. I was like, is this actually true? Is this actually happening? God, it can't be happening. It's just too surreal to comprehend. And it was an amazing feeling. It was like you came back to life again.
Sorry, Max. Yeah, it's Keith. You used that analogy or that idea of it being like Willy Wonka's chocolate ticket. It is a little bit like that because it wasn't like you're taken over by some other businessman, which we would have been delighted with. It would have been thrilled. It probably would have been pretty similar situations outside the grounds of just getting rid of Mike Ashley because he was obviously so unpopular and how the fans had suffered over the 14 years. But it's because it was what we're going into and the implications of that, of the money and all that sort of stuff, and the limitless and being able to do so much stuff. It was almost like winning the lottery from a football fan's perspective. And all of a sudden your head, whether you would outwardly say it or not, did go to things like, oh, Mbappe and blah, blah, blah. Now you knew rightly that wasn't happening. You weren't expecting that, not even necessarily wanting it, but it's the fact that was not a possibility. It was a different world. Keith, I have a question for you. It's just for yourself. You're obviously, reporting on Newcastle and you have done for some time. Under the new ownership, has the club changed from your perspective as a reporter and as a journalist? Is there different access? The coverage you get, has it always been the same, or do you feel a difference there?
I have to say, under the previous regime, Mike Ashley never really spoke to anyone, but when he did speak, it was to us at Sky. So. As much as the club wasn't going anywhere, from a Sky Sports journalistic point of view, it wasn't too bad because you knew that if he was going to say something or if he was going to leak any information, it was going to come to us. So from a purely selfish point of view, that was actually quite good. Whereas now, obviously, with the new owners, everyone's trying to speak to them, and you're all starting from scratch again. So you don't have that. But listen, that's good and it's fair and it's what everyone wants. I have to say, they do communicate with you guys, as you're well aware, in terms of what they do in the Newcastle website and the interviews they've done. Listen, everyone expected Amanda Staveley to talk on that first day, and she did. I would have liked to have spoken to her this week on the 1-year anniversary, but there's been a decision made by the club somewhere. I don't know who the decision was made by, for that Amanda Staveley or the chairman or Merdad or whoever it is isn't going to speak and field questions from journalists, which would have been nice to have asked, because we'd probably ask different questions to what the club ask. So a little bit disappointed in that, but it's not just me that's not speaking to her. She's decided not to speak to anyone apart from the club. But listen, that's their prerogative. They can do that. They can do that if they like. So, we've had a couple of interviews with her. I must say, I would have preferred if there'd been more, because there's been a couple of knockbacks along the way. But just in terms of the way, without sort of giving too much away in terms of how we get our information, but I just think the way they kind of deal with the media and the way they kind of treat us as a whole is very far removed to what it was under Mike Ashley. You're probably asking the wrong person, and if you want me to talk hugely negatively about Ashley in terms of the way he was with the media, because I hear a lot of my colleagues sort of, having a real pop at him and the way he treated, the way he never gave us information, but he was okay. He was actually okay with us at Sky. So I'm looking at that from a different point of view. But the way he was to you guys as supporters and treated you and what he's done to the club, obviously is really, really bad. Whereas now that with the owners that are there, they're going to treat the club and yourselves with love and respect, and giving information. I think there was an open letter on the website. I know I didn't say too much, but there's an open letter on the website. They're just communicating with you. They're talking to you now, and you almost probably felt, when you asked things in the past, you almost felt like you were in the wrong by asking, as if, how dare you ask these questions, or how dare you make these comments? Whereas it's actually simple. It's a simple equation. All these have to do is come in, talk to you, make you feel part of everything, and suddenly everything, and suddenly you're on side with them. It's such a simple thing to do. How Mike Ashley didn't get that, I will never ever understand. But listen, from my point of view, I wish there were more opportunities to speak to them than there have been. But it's certainly better for us all as a whole than it was previously. And I have to say, aside from the owners, Eddie Howe and his management team. I mean, I was at an event today at the Newcastle United Foundation where Eddie and his full backroom staff attended a talk-in with some elderly Newcastle United supporters who have maybe had some mental health problems over COVID, and they're maybe finding themselves alone without anyone to talk to. And they sat in with a full class and chatted to them and answered questions and did like a talk-in. It was honestly really amazing to see. And you see these things quite a lot where players or managers come along and they just want to get in, get out, get the photographs taken so it looks as though they were there. But I have to say, Eddie Howe and his backroom team, they were all there. Graham Jones was there. All the lads he brought from Bournemouth were there. Jason Tyndall, they all completely bought into it. And it actually looked to me and felt to me like they wanted to be there. They even played a little 15-minute match of walking football against one of the ladies' teams. And it was just really fun to see them involved like that. That would never have happened in the past. So I can't say enough about Eddie Howe and his backroom team. They've been great for us guys in the media to deal with. I think he really is a class act in terms of the way he deals with everyone. I think the owners have been significantly better with us in the media compared to previously. I just would have preferred if we'd done a few more interviews. But again, as I say, that is totally up to them and that's their prerogative.
And interestingly, there was the chairman released a statement today, or a letter to the fans today, and Black Mamba mentioned it in the comments there. He's saying their words today show exactly how well they've connected with the fans and read the room atmosphere at the club and the ground. Just as you said there, Keith, it's so easy to do. It's not a difficult thing. You just literally talk to them and say what you're planning to do. It's an open goal. You've led me very nicely on to the next topic, which is Eddie Howe, and it's actually, I suppose, that next big decision, the first big decision that the ownership had, which was the next coach. Obviously, Bruce happened and was never really going to be kept, and I think he knew that as well. But when he went after the Spurs game, or a little while after the Spurs game, we obviously had a decision to make, or there was decisions to be made, and it became quite apparent that it came down to Eddie Howe or Emery. What, in your unique journalistic position, how aware were you of the situation? Because we all know, I think Emery was at one point going to be given the job, and then maybe not, and then there was a bit of confusion there, and Eddie Howe seemed to get it. How close were you to the situation, or what was your knowledge of the situation around that time?
Well, Emery turned the job down. So, I mean, Emery was offered the job and turned it down. He turned it down because he was disappointed that information was being leaked out regarding the fact that he'd spoken to Newcastle. He wanted it all kept quiet, and I think he was spooked a little bit by the amount of information that came out. And look, I'm not saying where the information all came from, but I think, when the owners and the consortium look back, I think they probably do things differently another time, the next time. And I think that might be part of the reason why they've kind of not gone to ground, but they've kind of maybe stood back a little bit from interviews since then and information since then, because it's a learning process for them as well. I think with all the information that came out regarding Steve Bruce, when Steve Bruce left as well, there was a flood of information that we were all getting our hands on. And I don't think, if I'm honest, I don't think it helped the situation, and it made it all a lot more messy for everyone involved, including Steve Bruce on a personal level, which is why obviously he came out with the comments that he did afterwards, and that's how he felt. But with regards to Unai Emery, listen, he was number one choice, and I think the club have said that. Although they've not gone on record to say that, but I think there's an acceptance. I think even Eddie Howe actually has come out and said, "Look, I'm aware that someone else was first choice and I wasn't first choice, but listen, guys, I think it's been a blessing in disguise for you. I honestly really do. And I'll be the first one to hold my hands up and say that when Eddie Howe was named, and I think others will as well, I wasn't hugely enamoured or excited by it. I thought, oh God, is this really what they need as their first manager? Do they not need a bigger name or someone that's managed in Europe in the Champions League? But you know what? How wrong was I? Like, he has been a breath of fresh air in the place. I think he's been everything you needed and more. And I don't think he's just, even when he came in, I thought he feels like someone to maybe take over for the first year, maybe the first year and a half, 2 years. Listen, I don't think so. I think he's a real project for the future. And I think the fact he's now being named as a possible successor for Gareth Southgate in the future, which, by the way, that won't happen soon, but it could happen further the line in England for him. The fact he's been named, he's been linked to that potential vacancy, shows his standing in the game and shows that people have kind of remembered just how good he was. Part of my thinking was because I knew he turned down the Celtic job, and I kind of knew a little bit of information as to what was going on there, and I thought, I don't know if he doesn't fancy the Celtic job, is he really going to be okay with the pressure in the Newcastle job? But again, how wrong was I? I don't think you could have asked for any more. I mean, that run last season towards the end of the season, finishing the top 4 in the form table, unbelievable. And then continuing it on, you'd be 5th in the table if you'd got those 2 points against Crystal Palace. You know, those extra 2 points. So, listen, I think he's been great. And the one thing I'll say about Eddie Howe is, I've not heard one player say a single bad word about him, either on the record or off the record, since he came in. And I'm talking guys like, you know, Matt Ritchie, who's not shy when he's you know, pissed off about something or upset. He's not shy to like air his views. He's not a kick. He's not a kick of the ball under Eddie Howe. Not said a bad word about him. Look at the guys who left in the summer, guys like Kieran Clark and Dwight Gale, Jeff Hendrick, all these guys. Not a single murmur from any of them. And you don't often get that. That wouldn't have been the case under previous managers at the club. But there's a real respect for Eddie from the players, that not just the players he plays, but the players he doesn't play as well. And I think that really comes over in their behaviour after they've left, and I think that says everything about him as a man manager.
Yeah, I quite agree. Or that they're scared of Jason Tyndall; they might attack them. But yeah, no, I agree. I couldn't put it better myself. He's been, as you say, a breath of fresh air and absolutely fantastic. Whenever before he was announced, there was obviously a huge list of names. Max. At the time, if you can remember, and don't worry if you can't, do you remember, you know, who your preferred manager would have been as soon as Bruce went, out of anybody, you know, before Howe was put down as Howe and Emery were put down as favourites?
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember, as I said, so many names, but I do remember that Eddie Howe was one of the first ones who was mentioned at the beginning, and then sort of faded away, and other names popped up. But I instantly thought that was a good match. I don't know why I thought it. It's easy to say now, but I actually did think that, and partly it was because he was out of a job. I thought that was an easy fix, because I really wanted just Bruce to be gone. I thought it was a parasite. He needed to be gone. We didn't need him anymore. Just getting him out of the club. And obviously Graham Jones took over for the few weeks, and at that time it was we just needed a manager, needed someone to really get behind, and Emery seemed like a good fit at the start, and I was like, yeah, it looks good, but would it really go from Champions League to bottom of the table? Newcastle doesn't seem likely. So, and when that fell through quite quickly, I was thinking, just get Eddie Howe. It doesn't matter now. Just get him in, let him do his job. He has done well. He did well in Bournemouth. Maybe his way of playing doesn't add up to what we need right now, but I think he's a good manager. And it's been really nice since then. It's been as Keith said, it's the best fit we could have had. Maybe it was the perfect fit, and I'm super happy he's here, and I hope he can stay for many more years.
Here, completely agree. It's what Eddie did on his time off, I think, exemplifies what a man he is and what a manager is. The fact that he went to the likes of AC Milan and Liverpool, and did homework and learned maybe where his feelings were arguably at Bournemouth, maybe defensively, he was always called a defensively naive coach, and he went and did his homework, and now you look at our defences, one of the best in the league. Those decisions, they root home. Matt, do you remember who your choice would have been at the time?
It's going to sound a bit cliche, but anybody other than Steve Bruce,
Fair enough. Okay.
You looked at the names we were linked with. I would have been very surprised if Unai Emery actually did come to us, even if it was our first choice, just because of where we were in the table. I feel as though it's paid off in the end who we actually have got. I agree with the lads. Eddie Howe's been absolutely perfect for the club, and when he spent his time away from football and the way he studied the game, and he went, I think it was Atletico Madrid and clubs like that, and I feel as though he probably spent a bit of time away from the game, so people probably actually forgot how good of a coach he was, because where he took Bournemouth to and from, it was just, I'm not sure many other managers could actually achieve something like that. Yes, different calibre of job when it comes to club sizes, but for where we were at the time, trying to fight off relegation, Eddie Howe was doing that previously at Bournemouth. So I felt like it was the right fit at the time, and he's definitely proved right. It has been the right fit, and he's doing wonders for us. And I'm great. I'm very glad that he's the coach of Newcastle.
Yeah, me too. We're nearly done for tonight's, gents. Just one or two more questions, and that'll be us. One question we'll have is about the signings we've made. So I'll run them through you very quickly. So we've obviously Chris Wood, Trippier, Guimaraes, Target, Byrne, Target again technically because he signed a permanent deal, Botman, Pope, and Isak. Out of those signings, if I start with you, Keith, in your opinion, who do you think has been the most important signing Newcastle have made since the owners have taken over?
Kieran Trippier. I just think it was a sign. I think it was a signal of intent by signing him so soon after the takeover, and I think signing him made someone like Bruno Guimaraes sign for Newcastle. I think they would have struggled to get him if someone like Trippier hadn't already decided to join. I did an interview with Trippier a couple of weeks ago, actually, and I had a chat with him off camera afterwards, and I think he's a bit frustrated that people say he came for the money. He says that he's actually getting less money than he was at Atletico Madrid before he just went to England and he wanted to come back to the north of the country. But I think for a guy, an international player like Trippier, to come to Newcastle, who were bottom of the table without a win all season, they might even had one win at that point. I can't remember. You guys will correct me. Everything kind of merges into one now when I think back to that spell. But for him to come to a team who are mired in a relegation battle and be the first name there, it wasn't like Newcastle had already signed Chris Wood and Dan Byrne and then Trippier came in. He was literally the first name to arrive. And I think the business as well, to sign him for as little as 12 million for an England international who we can see how much he brings to the team. I think that is the best signing they've made. I still think the best signing of all was the manager, but I think closely followed by, in terms of players, I think Trippier. I mean, listen, Bruno Guimaraes brings a sparkle of gold dust, doesn't he, in terms of what he does, and we can all see how amazing a player is, and I'm not in any way talking that down, but I just feel the signal of intent of Trippier arriving so early in that transfer window paved the way for some of these other big names to arrive, and I think you'll look back in that in the future and you'll say, you know what, that was a big moment, him arriving at the football club at that point.
Yeah, and that he would have been mine, I'll be honest with you. He was the statement signing, I think, that we wanted. And I think you'll know this, having dealing with Eddie Howe a lot more. Eddie Howe likes his club captains, plural. He likes captains around, he likes leaders. And, Trippier is clearly a leader. He got injured in that game and we saw how much he helped, in terms of off the pitch being injured, still dictating the game and getting involved and going to the games. He's a leader of men as well. Matt, what about your most important signing? Doesn't have to be a player, by the way, as Keith alluded to. Could be the manager or something else.
Yeah, if it's not Eddie Howe, then yeah, Kieran Trippier by a country mile. I felt like he took the first step in that level of player to actually join Newcastle, even when we were in the position we were in. When he was at Atletico Madrid, he could have played an extra couple of years there, got offered a nice contract, played in Spain, but he's not. He's come home and he's actually, he's actually like worked hard and he's buckled down and he's wanted to actually fight for the club. And I felt like, yeah, we had a good group of players who did that for a few years, but having that real top level player to join and make that jump and do that and connect with the fans the way he has, it's just like a born leader, an England international, and he's pretty good at set pieces. So it just felt like he was, the top dog who's come in and absolutely just, grabbed it by the scruff of the neck.
Yeah, I agree. Anthony Smith and Black Mamba in the comments both agree with both of you. Trippier by a country mile, Anthony Smith says, and then Black Mamba Trippier as well. The statement signed and shows our ambition, well respected right away, influence and a professional leader all across the club. Max, try and not say Isak if you can. If you can. It can be Isak if you want. It can be Isak if you want. Who do you think?
Yeah, of course, it's the only one. It's Alexander Isak. No, I'm kidding. It's he hasn't had a time yet, but no, I'd say I agree with Keith and Matt. It's Trippier. I think it's he set the tone for the whole the process we started now, and some really good players followed. Dan Burn, Target. We shouldn't forget those guys. They really solidified our defense along with Trippier. But they kept us going during that spring period, and every player that has come in thus far has done a job and have improved us on the pitch immensely. Even Chris Wood, who I know many people are doubtful against, but we should never forget the games he played in for us in the spring and the two goals he scored and the presence he had on the pitch, and we would never have gotten those wins, in my opinion, without him. So, yeah. But, of course, the biggest one, in my opinion, still is Trippier and Eddie Howe.
Yeah. Chris Donnelly in the comments. Sorry, carry on. Keith, carry on.
Sorry. Can I just add, I know we've all said Kieran Trippier there, but I think if you actually honestly ask Eddie Howe and his backroom team, they kind of knew that Trippier was kind of lined up anyway, and it was just a case of sorting out the deal. So that one was expected. But I think if you ask them that honest question, I actually think they'll say Bruno, because I think. Listen, I'm not in any way downplaying the arrival of Kieran Trippier, because we all know how outstanding he's been and what he brings to the table, both on and off the pitch. But I think Bruno, I think they privately felt that he was probably unachievable in January. And then for them to finally get him with a week to go, I think it was a real pleasant surprise that they managed to get that deal done. And I could just tell by the language and the way they were at the time that they were like, "Wow, we've got this guy here." Whereas the Trippier thing, I think they expected that to happen before January. I think the talks were well underway as soon as Eddie Howe arrived. I think they knew at Christmas time, before Christmas, it was going to happen. But I think the Bruno one just came out of the blue. And I think that was the one that they'll look back and go, do you know what? That was a big moment for us, bringing him in, a Brazilian international player into the team in the January trial window for a club record fee at that point if he reaches all the clauses in his contract. So I think, although we've all said Trippier, I think if he asked Eddie Howe, he might say Bruno.
And the irony being, we haven't mentioned our player of the year last year, which was Joe Linton. Not a signing, but kind of was a signing, because obviously Eddie moved him, but then that leads into Eddie. Chris Donnelly in the comments said, Trippier, it's Eddie Howe on the pitch, which is a lovely way of putting it. And Matthew Watson said, I think Byrne goes under the radar, to be honest. He was monumental, as he was. Don't think anyone would disagree with that. I think it's just, I always, when I'm thinking about this sort of question and how difficult it is to answer, it's just lovely that it is difficult, because in previous years it was very depressingly easy. A couple of years ago, it's ASM, like hands down, or maybe Wilson, hands down. Like it's just no argument. If we even go back a couple of years, to Shearer, and then there'd be, as you're going to different people, it's so difficult now to pick the best player, the most influential, and that is the sign of a really good club. I want to finish off with two last very quick questions, sort of yes/no answers. And the first one is hard. I'm going to put you all on the spot, and we're going to clip this and play it back in 10 years' time, so you'll all be held to account. No, I'm only messing. So it's very simple, and it is, in your opinion, so it's just an opinion, will Newcastle United win the Premier League in the next 10 years? Max, you have a think, Keith. Max, you can go first. Just a yes or a no. Feel free to elaborate if you want, but
no, I don't think so. I want to think so, but it's hard to see right now because I think City is so. Yeah, they're doing so well right now, and the people from the top 6 clubs are always going to be there, and they're going to improve, and they're going to have bad times, they're going to have good times. I don't know how we will go on. It's looking really positive right now, and I don't want to get ahead of myself to say that we're going to win the league. I always want to see, as we always said, I'm a club that tries to win stuff, and I hope we win something one day. I hope we win the Premier League sooner than maybe 10 years, but also I can wait 20 years. I'm young. I have some years.
You're young, yeah. You're annoyingly young. Yes, you can win. Matt, what about you?
I'm a glass half full type of guy, so I'm going to say yes. And it's probably within the next possibly 7 years. Yeah, I'll probably drop 3 off. That's just because I'm optimistic. I just feel like we're taking the right steps, and we've done so much in short space of time. So hopefully, yeah. Hopefully.
Okay, Keith, what about you?
Can I sit in the fence?
Yeah, if you want. You can if you like. You can sit in the fence.
I think you'll be there or thereabouts. Okay, I really think you'll be up there challenging. But as Max said, they're at Man City. Do you know what I mean? I mean, they're getting stronger and stronger. I mean, they've just bought the best player in the world. Look, he's going to break all sorts of records this season and moving forward. And it's going to be so difficult to compete with them. And it's not like, as I said earlier, it's not like you've got boundless money to spend due to the financial fair play situation. So I think that's going to make things more difficult. So I do think you'll be up there. Whether you win it or not, I'm unsure. But I'm going to nail my colours to the mast here and say that I think you'll definitely have won a trophy by then. I'm just not sure if you'll have won the league. I can see you certainly having won at least one trophy, a cup trophy by then. But I think to keep it going over the course of a year and win the Premier League title is such a difficult thing to do. Look how much Liverpool have struggled in the last couple of years. They won it in COVID, but look how close they've come up against Man City. So I think it's going to be very, very difficult. But for us even to be speaking in this kind of language right now is ridiculous. Remember, you guys were just like, we just want a team that tries. So let's just go.
100%, yeah. And I'd say I don't think anyone's going to be bothered if we don't. It depends obviously on the context.
Oh, no.
But yeah, no, that's very interesting. A really good comment there from Lawrence Evans. Keith, you'll appreciate. Said, "I'm not ashamed to admit that when Keith broke a story last year, I had tears in my eyes. My missus was even happy. She hates football. I can also attest to that. My wife was very happy.
Well, he was
confused as well.
Well, he wasn't the only one with tears in his eyes that day, because as you saw with me, it was it kind of got a bit too much for me, and I'm not even a Newcastle fan, so I know how you guys felt.
You were just exhausted, mate. You were just tired. You worked you to the bone. Look, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to finish off with one last question. It's dead easy. It's sort of score prediction for Saturday. What do you think will happen? We always finish our podcast with a really quick score prediction. I'll start off this week. Obviously, Newcastle home to Brentford, back home again after a lovely thumping win against Fulham. And I am just going to go, and I'm going to try and not give any comment. I'll give you any score. I want to say 2-0 to Newcastle, 2-0 win. Max, what do you think?
I'd say exactly the same thing I said last week when I said it's going to be a 1-1 draw, and this time instead of Mitrovic scoring, it's going to be Tony scoring and Wilson scoring.
The game.
And I hope we win 4-1 instead.
Perfect. So he's going to get injured after about 10 minutes by that logic, and we'll be grand. Matt, what about you? Score?
2-1. I got 2-1. I think Bruno.
2-1 win.
Yeah, I think Bruno pulled the strings. So
good man. Keith?
I agree with you, Stuart. I was going to say 2-0 before you said it, so I don't want to go changing it just because you've said it to be different. I think comfortable home win for Newcastle. I think things are beginning to look up again after the win last week, and I do think the tails are up. I think confidence has returned after the 4 goals against Fulham last week, and I can see a home win for Newcastle at the weekend. Yeah.
Brilliant. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for joining me tonight. Keith, especially yourself, thanks for joining us as our very special guest and for giving us your insight. It was genuinely really interesting, and I know a lot of fans, and we've had a lot of watchers tonight as well. If you are watching along, please do like the video. It really does help us, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow, and join us tomorrow for our match preview of the Brentford game. Gentlemen, have a good night, and I'll see you again. Bye now.
Cheers, guys. See you soon.
Bye.